So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this session. So this is session 5B. So we have 6 papers presented here, 6 wonderful papers. So the first order should be Dr. Suarjito, but he's not coming yet. So we will start with the second paper from Mrs. Joyce Yulinda Luke with the title Perspective of Computer Science Students on Online Learning Quality and Learning Apps for Sustaining Communicative Competence. So I would like also to remind for the participant for the Q&A session, please write your question in the chat column. So I will deliver your question to the presenter. But if you are not, you still want to ask more, I will also let you to ask by mic. So without further ado, let's start the presentation. So I will let Brilly to play the video.
Hello everyone, it's nice to see you all. I'm Joyce Yulinda Luke from Language Center of BINUS. I'm going to present about our paper entitled Perspectives of Computer Science Students on Online Learning Quality and Learning Apps for Sustaining Communicative Competence Growth in this valuable BINUS conference, ICOBA 2020. Without further ado, I'll begin with the next slide. Here I will introduce the agenda of my presentations, which consists of 8 parts, such as background, aim, scope, significance, literature review, methodology, findings and discussion, conclusion and recommendation, acknowledgement, and references. Then I begin with the background. There are 4 underlying reasons for conducting this study. First is the shifting learning mode during pandemic COVID-19 from learning at classroom into learning at home. Second is online learning permits learning flexibility and reaching out learners easily. The third is inability of educators to facilitate communicative competence in online learning due to the burden of teaching preparations and teaching tasks. Finally, focus of online learning is mostly on content delivery than skill delivery. After that, we move to the aim, scope, and significance of the study. The aim of the study is to indicate quality of online learning and online devices to facilitate communicative competence skills. The scope covers online learning quality, online learning device, communicative competence, and computer science students as respondents of the study. And the significance of the study is to ensure improvement communicative competence through online learning quality satisfactions and online devices used. To the relevant literature reviews that become underlying state of the art of these research. There are 3 of them, such as a theory from Coates and Humphrey study in 2001 that found online materials is useful if the stress is put on the active engagement of the students. The second theory is from Jeung's study in 2018, who stressed on multimedia application in online learning that facilitate language learning and development of communicative competence. And at last was a study of Salim in 2014 that point out that WhatsApp can maintain improvements in writing skills as well as speaking ability. Of the study. The researchers employ case study as the method or the approach, and that 30 computer science students participated as the respondents of the study, and using Google Form as the survey instrument, and the last, the analysis of the data, the researchers use statistics or percentage. Since there are two main objectives of the study, the findings of the research were delivered in different slides. The first slide deals with the first finding, where the focus was to figure out respondent perspectives on the satisfactions toward online learning quality factors that contributes to communicative competence growth. The results indicates that satisfaction's differences of four leading factors that influence quality of online learning in aiding communicative competence. Among four sets of online learning quality factors, content development is more important, affecting the development of communicative competence in online learning. Then for the second results, the study reveals among various preferences of online learning devices used during online learning implementations. Students claim that video screen sharing and chat devices were really helpful to increase their communicative competence, since the tools provides autonomy to communicate their ideas. Last but not least is conclusion and recommendation. The study concludes that even though online learning are great solution for delivering lessons to learners during COVID-19 outbreak, communicative competence does not always expand progressively due to two learning interruptions, such as online learning quality and online learning devices. The study also recommends that by paying attention to quality factors and apps usage when addressing online learning, it is hoped that online learning will consequently assist the growth of communicative competence. Finally, the author will express deepest gratitude to BINUS, RIG Crosscom, and RTTO for supporting the implementations of this study, as well as special thanks to Dr. Ulani for her assistances in writing this paper, as well as to Ms. Sira Teosebas Sela for her support in data gathering. The following slides indicates the references that support EcoBARD article writing. Thank you for listening and enjoy the fruitful discussions following these presentations. Happy conference!
Okay, so we already watched the presentation from Joyce Yolinda Luke. So there is a question from Reza Rahutomo. So Bu Joyce, I'm surprised that chat learning has interest among students. According to you, why is it interesting for them? So,
okay. Thank you, Ms. Reza, for the nice question, Mbak. Okay, so yeah, during the online meeting that I facilitated with my students for teaching them, I found that chat rooms becomes a the most favorable tools, yeah, or the medium for discussion with the students, because probably they consider that through the chat room they can easily communicate with me because I cannot see them. Okay, so I cannot see their what's their how do they look like at the time when they just have a chat with me, and then also because they consider that it is free for them. Yeah, they can communicate without paying attention to their friends. Probably if in a classroom, if they are kind of passive students or they are introvert students, they probably not easily to communicate with me because they are afraid when they make a mistakes, then the friends were laughing at them. So that might be the condition or the reasons why most of the students like to have a chat for the online learning. Okay. Does it answer your question, Pak? Hello, Pak Reza. Okay. Thank you, Pak.
Okay. So is there another question from the audience? If not, maybe I will also interested to ask. Okay, there is from Dr. Insinyur Hari Sutanto. How the online learning will also educate them to be a good character student?
Okay. Okay, thank you for the tough question, Pak Hari. I think that it's not easy for us when we facilitate online learning and then we can at the same time try to educate the students to behave well, yeah, Pak. Because I think that when they join the class, the online classroom, sometimes they do not turn on their camera, so we don't know exactly what they are doing at the time, and then when they express their opinions through although their microphone is on, but we don't know exactly how do they their conditions at the time. I mean, whether they are sitting or whether they are standing in a proper way or they just lying in a bed and then try to communicate with us. We don't know exactly. But I think that through the online learning, things that we can try to correct our students in order to make them aware with their personality, with their character is how do they react, they give a reaction. For example, if the students one of their friends try to communicate and then express their idea or express their comments or try to answer questions delivered by by the teachers, and they can try to give a response, like for example, give a clap if it is a good, or they can just show their thumb directly like this, so that will it will encourage their friends. Yeah, I think that's one of the good characters that we can build through the online learning, Pak.
Dr. Hari, is it? Wow. Okay, thank you for the answer. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
So it's also pointing to me because I'm millennials.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's very interesting study from Miss Joyce. So thank you very much for your presentation and for answering the question. Also, thank you for the question from the audience.
Yeah,
so thank you very much.
Yeah.
So for the next presenter, I would like to invite Dr. Suharjito with the title Tourism Recommender System Using Hybrid Multi-Criteria Approach. So we will play the video from Dr. Suharjito, and then Dr. Suharjito, please be ready for answering the question. Thank you.
Firstly, I will introduce myself. My name is Suharjito. At this moment, I would like to present our research about tourist recommender system using hybrid multi-criteria approach. This research has been done by Meiji and me. The background of this research is tourism is one sector that is being developed by The Indonesian government, which has very important role in generating foreign exchange. Information about the existing tourist destination in the province of Jakarta has been developed at both print and digital media that can be accessed through website and mobile. However, the information available today is very complex and not yet served efficiently in accordance with personal preference. Recommendations of the attraction are very needed by tourists when traveling to find the tourist information in accordance with the wishes of the tourists. Thus, this research was conducted to design a smart tourist recommendation system in the development of tourists in Jakarta, so that recommendation of tourist attraction can be applied in accordance with the preference and personal characteristic of each tourist. From the literature review, like Su Sang, smart tourism can be composed some elements like information exchange in the center of the system, and cloud computing, artificial intelligence, business, tourists, scanned zone, government, and Internet of Things. In this research have been developed in some states. The first is problem analysis. The second is formulating research objective. And the third is literature study based on the recommended system and the application of mobile. And next is design and implementation of the application. The last is evaluation of the application. The architecture of tourist recommendation system in this research is like this. The first layer is user. The user can use the recommendation system based on mobile application. And the second layer is mobile application that composed of HTTP client and JSON connector. The third layer is server, that is web server that composed of recommended system, domain ontology, user database, and destination database. Design of the recommendation system is like this. The first is input, a recommendation component, and output. The input is composed as a user profile, rating data, and feature. The recommendation component composed of some method like collaborative rating, content-based rating, multi-criteria rating, ontology-based recommendation, and hybrid recommendation. The output is a recommendation list based on the personal data and the rating of the destination. And the generated multi-criteria rating and recommendation with a feature of the destination. The interface of this application is like this. The first, this is the user interface of the first display, and this is some recommendation, and this is the rating input, and this is the rating of the destination. Based on this application, we have evaluated of the performance. The performance has been evaluated by some user using precision and recall performance. This is the average of recall performance. And besides that, we have compared the method that has been used based on the root mean square error. Based on the root mean square error, the best performance is multi-criteria method. And based on this evaluation, we can conclude that by combining several methods, like ontology-based, content-based, and collaborative filtering, multi-criteria rating, produce a recommendation system that was able to cover the shortcomings of its method. The recommendation system that was built can be implemented into a mobile platform like Android operating system using a combined algorithm of the methods. The evaluation result of the storage destination recommendation system based on personal preference and history of previous user rating is 70% in precision. The smallest error rate combined after performing root-mean score test is multi-criteria rating method, which in average value is 0.84. The feature work for this result is recommendation can be used with very large amount of data and root-market rating, so the system could be demonstrate the better capability of recommendation system. The another feature work is we can develop recommended system using another profile like comment, destination history, and the feature of the destination. That's all of my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Suharjito for the presentation. So is there any question from the audience? Okay, so if not yet, okay, there is a question from Dr. Hari Sutanto. So an excellent result and excellent research, but how the research could be implemented to promote a new destination that not yet explored? There is no enough data. Okay, so that's the question from Dr. Hari. So
okay, thank you very much for Dr. Hari for your question. I think it is a nice question. For adding new data, this application can be add some data based on the destination. So in this research, there are just limited data, so that all of data in tourist destination in Jakarta has been input. But if all of the destination has been input, so the application can be implemented efficiently, maybe for all people in Jakarta or for all tourists. I think we hope that after this research has been implemented or before implemented, we will add some data or destination of all maybe in Indonesia, not just in Jakarta. Okay, that's all. Maybe my answer. It is enough.
Okay, yeah, there's some comment also from Reza. Thank you very much. So, is there another question? So, if no more question, then thank you very much for Dr. Suharjito. It's very interesting research. So, I believe the tourism Indonesia really needs this kind of recommender system because we have so many potential. So, it needs to be optimized with the recommender system like this. Thank you very much for Dr. Suharjito.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nico.
Okay. Okay, so the next presenter, it will be my paper. So the title is a review of a traffic violation detection technology in reporting mechanism by Nico Suranta. So Brili, please play the video. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity given to me to present my paper. My name is Nico Suranta. I am from Master of Computer Science, BINUS Graduate Program, Bina Nusantara University. Today I will present my paper with the title, A Review of Traffic Violation Detection Technology in Reporting Mechanism. So this is the outline of my paper. Started with the introduction, explaining about the background and the motivation of my research, and also the review methodology. It explains how we did the literature review. And then we also continue with the in-depth review and analysis. From the collected references, we start to analyze the state of the art and the topics deeper. And then we also identify the challenge for this research, and it's ended with the conclusion. So the number of people in this world is increasing significantly. So before, the traffic violation always detected by police, but currently there is a significant need for technology to be implemented to help police in detecting the traffic violation. So some technology have been invented to help this process. For example, the RFID, and also the vehicular ad hoc network. So, and then also the computer vision. So all of this technology before have been implemented by researchers in order to detect the traffic violation. So in this paper, we try to do the review of the technology that has been implemented to detect the traffic violation and identify the challenge for this research in this field. So we continue with the review methodology. So this is the source of the paper we use from Google Scholar, IEEE Explore, and Science Direct. So we use a couple of keywords here, like traffic violation detection, vehicular ad hoc network, computer vision, radio frequency identification. We also do pairing of the first keywords with every other keywords. So from this mechanism, we found 33 literatures that are selected for the further review. So we try to classify the references that we find. So some of technology have been used to detect the traffic violation. There are 3 classifications, which are sensor, wireless network, and also the computer vision. So for the sensor, the most common sensor used are infrared sensor and RFID. The advantage, it is simple and cheaper tool, but the disadvantage, the only limited number of violators or violation incident that can be detected. The wireless network, for example, the VANET and the wireless frequency, it has several protocol variants for data communication and have more coverage area. But the problem is, the vehicle must have technology VANET for the use this method. And also there are some interference issue with this technology. And then the last one is the computer vision. In this technology, we use CCTV or camera to capture the incident and also do some machine learning or deep learning process to capture the violation incident. So this is the advantage. It can capture the image and videos to process violation data more effectively. But its advantage, it's more costly and is processing from computer or cloud computing. So we try to review more deeper about the topic. So this is VANET. VANET is vehicular ad hoc network. So how is the concept? So in every, so in this concept, there are 3 aspects that we want to insist. So there are inter-vehicle communication, as you can show, can see here. So the inter-vehicle, they can communicate each other. So, for example, when the car A is too close to the car B, it can give a sign to car B. So the accident can be avoided. So it will become significant when the autonomous vehicle is started to implemented in the real life, because it can help to avoid the accident. So there are also the vehicle to roadside communication. So from the roadside, there are some terminal that collected data about the vehicle. For example, we collect the data, so like how many vehicle that pass by this roadside tower, and also how about the velocity. So from that data, we can calculate, for example, how crowded that road, and also they can also give the signal to the traffic light, for example, to optimize the implementation of traffic light, for example, giving different duration for the traffic light in different position. So the traffic can be implemented more smoothly. So the next one is the computer vision. So here we use the CCTV to get the data for the system. And we also use some analytic system. For example, we can use here to analyze the people, or to analyze the license plate using the number detection, like that. And we can connect it with the transport monitoring system. So with this method, we can also calculate, for example, about how crowded the road, and also detect about the car that do the cross the traffic light, for example. So what is the future challenge? So there are some future challenge for this research. So most of the paper is about computer vision, referring to the plate number registration detection. In some cases, there could be a driver who is not the owner of the vehicle made a violation. Thus, developing a face detection to the driver is needed to help identify the violator more accurately. Another challenge for identifying traffic violation in the future is the application of the device in number of circumstances, such as various weather condition and light condition. So as we know, the image really depends on the quality of the detection is really depends on the quality of the image. So when the quality of the image is not good, so it can decrease the accuracy of the detection. So having a sensor to work non-stop could cost electricity. Therefore, a low power implementation of the system will be another challenge. And last, the integration of all the methods will enhance the ability of traffic violation detection. Finally, we go into the conclusion. So the conclusion is the traffic population is increasing significantly. Therefore, the implementation of technology to help the police become necessary. The most implementation of traffic violation detection technology is using wireless sensor network, VANET, RFID, and computer vision. The low power implementation and ability to work in various weather conditions become a future challenge for the traffic violation detection system. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I would welcome to any questions from the audience. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to, okay, there is a question from Dr. Hari. I think there is an excellent presentation, Dr. Nico. I think the research is very useful to regulate the traffic in Jakarta. But in some cases, it's very hard to educate the society. Do you have any suggestion? Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting thought from Dr. Hari. So yeah, actually, it's also the same situation with the COVID-19, because we can give the very good rules, but sometimes the behavior of the society is unpredictable. Yeah, to educate the society, actually to educate the society, we can improve, so for like the Mrs. Joyce, online learning like that, I think, and then maybe based on the augmented reality or the virtual reality, we can develop some module to educate the user. So by using the like augmented reality or virtual reality, they also can feel the actual feeling in the road. What happens, for example, if they doing the violation. Maybe they will suffer a car crash or something, but you don't want to suffer it in the real life. So I think that's my thought. I think it's very interesting, or maybe in the future, we can also implement some sensor and put it in the car, so we can give some warning to the user. So thank you very much from Dr. Hari. Is it okay? Okay, and then from Dr. Suharjito, what are the topics of the research in this field? Still interesting for the research. Yes, it's interesting. So from actually the interesting one, maybe the integration between all the method involved. For example, the VANET is itself is the wireless networking, how it coordinates the sensor data from sensor and communicate the data from sensor from car to car and then from car to the roadside. So I think for Dr. Suharjito, the most interesting is about to integrate all of the method like RFID, VANET, and also the sensor. Okay, and then Ms. Joyce, what do you think about the traffic regulation in Jakarta and new normal era? What should be improved? Oh, okay, so traffic regulation. Okay, the new normal. Okay, the new normal. I still don't get the relation between the new normal and the traffic, because I don't know, because the new normal I think it's most about the relation. I mean, how the people interact to people. Yeah, Miss Joyce. Yeah. So maybe it's more about the for example the road crosser, but I don't know. So yeah, I think I should think further about this one. Okay. Okay. And also from Mr. Reza, I think this tech could be realized in Jakarta, but only in specific such as Central Business District. It is easier to manage locally. Okay, thank you very much. This is very interesting thought from Mr. Reza Rahutomo. So thank you very much for the question from the audience. That's very many questions. Thank you very much. So for the next paper, I think, yeah, it's still my paper. With the title Social Media Data Crowdsourcing as a New Stream for Environmental Planning and Monitoring, a review. Yeah, so Mr. Brili, please play the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Nico Suranta. I'm from Master of Computer Science, BINUS Graduate Program, Bina Nusantara University. So I will present the paper with title Social Media Data Crowdsourcing as a New Stream for Environmental Planning and Monitoring, a review. This is the outline for my presentation, started with the introduction, and we will talk about the review methodology, how we do the literature review, and then we do the in-depth review and analysis, and then we also identify the challenge for the research in this field, and then last we will go with the conclusion. So environmental problems related to the energy, food security, global warming, and global population growth are some of the key issues that need to be resolved effectively in order to prevent a global crisis. So we can see some of the issue is a flood, as you can see here. Maybe you remember that flood was happened in Jakarta recently. So social media as a source of data. So many people are sharing the event, yeah. For example, the flood event, maybe we remember that many people sharing about the flood event from their places. So it can be used as source of data, actually, to identify the environmental problem, for example. So there is a technique named crowdsourcing, which is a compilation of data that uses mass data available on the internet. So in this research, we will do a review about a crowdsourcing technique, especially for environmental monitoring and planning. So this is how we review the paper. So this is the source of the paper: Google Scholar, IEEE Explore, and Science Direct. So the keywords is crowdsource social media, crowdsource environmental management, crowdsource environmental science, crowdsource and natural science, and so on. So we focus on the implementation of social media for monitoring and planning. So as we can see, there's here that the data that we get from the social media. So most of the data here get from Twitter, and then the second one is from Flickr and other social media platform. So for the monitoring, we will use the social media for the environmental monitoring and also to monitor for the tourism and recreation matters. And for the planning, we will use it for the urban planning and hazard preparedness. So here's some paper that we collect for the environmental monitoring. So from various social media. So you can see from the paper in the first row, the social media as a tools for building a public awareness and communication for environmental issues. Or from the reference number 16, we can see that there is a flood area mapping using social media, that like the one that we show in the introduction page. And also, for example, biodiversity identification using social media down to specific species name. So that's the one that related to environmental. Also some topics related to tourism, for example, like tourist favorite destination identification using uploaded photo in Flickr social media. And we also collect the paper about the environmental planning. So, for example, there are paper in the first row, horticultural orchids trait identification using social media, and also social media as a decision support on hazard event risk perception. And also another one, that interesting one, is the cycling and air pollution exposure analysis using social media Strava. So there's some paper that we use from for the environmental planning. So we try to summarize the generic architecture from the crowdsourcing system from the various paper that we reviewed before in the previous page. So basically the system consists of three parts. The first one is data collection. So the data collection, we use the social media API. Yeah? We use media mobile apps like Waze, Google Maps, and many social media platform. And then we do the processing of the social media data, because the social media data, it's still raw data, so we cannot get any insight from the social media data. So what are the processing that we do? For example, the NLP, natural language processing. There is a tokenized name entity recognition, and also there is some clustering, machine learning that we can do to process the data to become the insightful message. And then also the last part, after the processing, we will visualize the result. So there are some form of the visualization like urban planning, environment monitoring, or hazard preparedness. So here we show some Twitter that we detect, and then how we can process the data. So we can give you some example. So here, for example, water is knee deep at Coast Road junction with Chillingham Road. So we can see here, so the algorithm that we use can identify the place, and also, for example, here is knee deep. So maybe the algorithm can predict that maybe the depth for the flood approximately like 0.5 meter. So what is the challenge for the crowdsourcing for environmental monitoring and planning? So the first one is the big data. So social media contains a huge amount of data. Every day, every time people keep sharing about the data. So communities through social media can voluntarily participate in providing information about floods, landslide-prone areas, accident-prone areas, and so on. The second challenge is about the real-time data. Data can be quickly obtained for analysis. This is unnecessary in some cases that require a rapid response. So by using the social media data, actually we can get the most up-to-date event, because people usually broadcast and update their social media on the time that the event is happening. So the third one is about information diversity. So there are some problems with the social media data, especially about the accuracy of the data. So metadata information, for example, geotags, timestamps, may not be relevant to the subject of the photo in photo media. That's one of the problems. And also the type of social media application used may also affect the quality of the result of analysis. For example, the difference in resolution can also affect the information that can be delivered by social media. The next one is the ethics and data privacy. So although the data are collected based on the publicly available data, there are some cases that users do not willingly provide information. And due to the unawareness situation, there may be some inappropriate data because people is unaware when sharing about the data. It's different with the survey, because when doing survey, people is aware that they are sharing the data. And the next one is data validation. So in some cases, for example, in crowdsourcing data image, showed a flooded street. Well, in fact, the information, it wasn't correct. So a data set training is required to increase the validity of data image. It can also be combined with digital validation using physical sensors, manual validation by relevant users, and accurate data itself. So that's the challenge for the crowdsourcing for environmental planning and monitoring. So the conclusion, the availability of API in social media will ease the data collection for environmental monitoring and planning. So crowdsourcing method can be used for real-time data collection. And the development of current data analysis techniques such as deep learning and natural language processing greatly affects the results of analytics of data using crowdsourcing methods. So the identified consideration key points of crowdsourcing data using social media are data integration, the integration methods, data mining quality, and the ethics aspect of the data, and the data availability assurance. So that's all my presentation. Thank you for watching my presentation. I would like to welcome any question. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for playing the video. Is there any question from the audience? Okay, if there is no question, maybe we will move on to the next presenter. So, okay. Yeah, so the next paper will be about the combating COVID-19 challenge for data protection and privacy by Ms. Siti Yuniarti and Erna Ratnanisi. So please welcome Ms. Siti Yuniarti.
Combating COVID-19 Challenge for Data Protection and Privacy, presented by Siti Yuniarti and Erna Ratnanisi from Business Law, Binus University. COVID-19 is a disease caused by a new virus and has been spread globally since it detected last year. Technology takes an essential role to combat the virus, including to do contact tracing as part of health surveillance. Even the contact tracing is not a new method to combat the virus. However, the using of technology has a robust attention to data protection and privacy. Specific regulation and/or guideline to protect the personal data and privacy on this COVID-19 issued by some countries as well as international organizations. Later, this paper is examining how the data protection and privacy is respond to technology challenge in the COVID-19, including in Indonesia. Using normative legal research, this paper is finding out that utilization of technology to fight the COVID-19, that is the Indonesia official contact tracing, has a legal basis according to the existing regulation, and the protection of data is reflected on the user policy of the apps with some notes. However, future research is required to ensure that the apps is protect the user personal data and privacy technically and comparing with the other country as well. COVID-19 became a global pandemic since it declared the COVID threat become one of the most difficult tests faced by humanity in the modern history. Technologies become a tool to assist many countries to combat the virus, including finding a vaccine and stop spreading the virus. For example, China using artificial intelligence, big data to provide information required. On COVID-19 case, the information regarding how it caused and how it spread is important to prevent and slow down the transmission. Technology is considered effective to monitor movement of people, which is possible to spreading the virus. For example, on the Ebola case, the aggregate mobility information for telecom data was used during the Ebola outbreak in Africa. And then there are 47 contact tracing applications available globally and still counting, but operated by government and private. For example, Google and Apple collaborating for COVID-19 contact tracing technology for their user. Even the technology role on combating the COVID-19 is acknowledged, it also robust discussion relating privacy and data protection that potential to impact to human rights. United Nations is warning that combating the COVID-19 shall be put human rights as a key. This paper is a normative legal research that focusing on value, norms, and written rules. As a normative legal research, the research is conducted through regulation and literature review that classified as secondary data. Then the research approach that uses static approach and conceptual approach. To support this paper is also assessing Indonesia electronic contact tracing based on data protection principle as stated in the existing regulation. Then, what is contact tracing? Contact tracing is defined as the identification and follow-up of person who may have met a person infected with the virus. Contact tracing can be divided into 3 steps. First is contact identification, second is contact listing, and third is contact follow-up. According to Tamer, contact tracing could be implemented with different technology that are using Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, or adapting GPS technology, or using data from social network. However, the contact tracing is also faced with some critical issues that are accuracy, privacy, and energy consumption. United Nations warning the response of the COVID-19 shall respect to and not abuse to human rights, including privacy and data protection. What is privacy? Actually, privacy is an abstract concept. Warren stated that privacy is to protect emotional of individual that called as a right to be let alone. Alan Westin associate concept privacy as control over personal information. Personal information itself is interpreted as any information relating to identified data subject, for example, name, marital status, and then religion, and so on. As part of data protection, there are some specific personal data considered as sensitive data, for example, data health. Facing the COVID-19, Global Privacy Assembly noted that 50 entities that has issued specific guideline for data protection on COVID-19. Data collected is not only using by the country but also shared to other country and international health organization that is recommended by WHO to handling COVID-19. Based on the assessment from WHO and EU guideline, it could be summarized that to respect personal data health as part of data protection and privacy, then the use of personal data in COVID-19 shall be made anonymized. Indonesia is one of the countries affected by COVID-19. President of Republic Indonesia has declared that Indonesia is under health emergency on March. Then some emergency action has been conducted by the government, including conducting contact tracing as part of health surveillance. Peduli Lindungi is official national contact tracing application which developed by PT Telkom Indonesia under Ministry of Communication Decree. Peduli Lindungi as electronic contact tracing is made under some legal basis as classified into 3 categories: health surveillance, electronic contact tracing, and protection of personal data. Based on the regulation, basically contact tracing is allowed as part of health surveillance is allowed and proposed to obtain measurable information for decision making related to the disease. The electronic contact tracing is involve personal data since the application will connect to user's gadget and allow to access some information. Related to privacy and data protection on the electronic contact tracing, which is Peduli Lindungi, Ministry of Communication Decree only stated that privacy and data protection will be referred to the applicable law. However, draft of Indonesia Data Protection Act has not been approved at this moment. Then, the privacy and data protection of the electronic contact tracing will be referred to the existing legislation as described in the table 2. That can be summarized as first, subject to prior consent of data subject, and then clear information regarding data collecting and processing that shall be provided before the prior consent given by data subject, and then comply with the principle of data protection as stated the government regulation, which are collection limitation, purpose specification, data quality principle, use limitation, security safeguard, and destructive of personal data. Then this paper is assessing compliance of such regulation on the Peduli Lindungi application. However, the assessment is not including technical and system procedure of the application. Assessment is referring to any information provided by the government on the apps. Comparing with the Trace Together, a Singapore contact tracing application, most information related to the application cannot be found in the Peduli Lindungi website. So the detailed information provided when user is installing and or sign in into the application. The general information provided on the apps is developed by PT Telkom Indonesia, and then the application available in App Store and Google Play. Basically, the procedure of the apps when the apps is installing, the apps will ask permission to active the Bluetooth and the data location, and then Bluetooth will identify other user on the Bluetooth range and keep the record for 14 days. The user identity will be ID anonym. And then the function of the apps will send you the notification if user in the public area and close to other application user, and then user in infected area or an uninfected area, and or user is out of isolation area when they are still on self-quarantine. The apps will identify other application user and keep their ID anonym for 14 days. Technology using for security is Bluetooth, and then feature available is red zone information, list of hospital, public health, and health consultation. This app is volunteer and not mandatory. We also assess the compliance of data protection principle. According to the Ministry Decree, there are some principles that we comply by the apps. First, prior consent. When the user installing the apps will ask prior approval for keep phone number and access to Bluetooth location. And then user phone number will be used by the government to contact the user if the user has contact with the person infected. And then the user is entitled to revoke their consent by sending written notification by email. And then data collects by apps is user handphone number, user ID, anonym, location, and timestamp. And then the apps also inform purpose of the collection is using for tracking contact listing, setting self-quarantine location, inform the zone classification, and information for the government decision making. Data cannot be changed. So if the user want to change the data, user shall reinstall the for user data change. And then the government stated that the data will not distribute to other party unless to the authority that appointed for COVID-19 or is stipulated by law. For security safeguard using Bluetooth security, and period to keep the data not stated clearly. It's only information that the system will keep the ID anonymous for 14 days and the server will erase the record when the user is installing. So as conclusion, we conclude that some country and international organizations have taken initiation to provide a guideline for data protection and privacy on the COVID-19 pandemic, including the anonymous data as the answer. And a letter related to Indonesia official electronic contact tracing, Peduli Lindungi, we conclude that the apps is established under the Indonesia existing data protection regulation that has not been strengthened yet by the Specific Data Regulation Act, and then term and condition as mentioned on the Indonesia Contact Tracing apps has reflected the data protection principle as stated in the existing regulation. But we have some note. First, it's not explicit that period of application existing and the data retention. And the second is recommended to put those terms on the app's website, so it helps person who is willing to install the apps but need more information. And third, since a specific data protection act has not been issued until today, the data sharing between the authorities shall refer to clear and valid guidance, as well as between the state and international organization. And the last, in accordance to strengthen the legal protection for personal data and privacy, the Specific Data Protection Act is a must. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for Ms. Siti Yuniarti for very interesting speech. So is there any question from the audience? So there is one question from Dr. Hari Sutanto. In case of pandemic, could the government intervene the data privacy of the society? And how far the government can access the privacy and data protection? So please, Ms. Siti, for answering this question.
Okay, thank you, Pak Nico. Thank you, Pak Hari, for the question. The answer is not. The government could not intervene our data privacy of society. So, if the government need to collect our data in case to combat the COVID-19, the government have to do by respecting the data protection principle. For example, they have to inform us first. And the second is have to inform what kind of data collect and then how long the data will be kept. Some like we told in our paper that WHO and Uni Europa state that the data of society shall be made anonymous. Thank you, Pak.
Okay. Dr. Hari, did you satisfy or want to ask more? Okay, while waiting, I have one question, Miss Siti. So, so the data protection and privacy, yeah, for the, I think it's for combating COVID-19. So I think it's for the medical data, right? Or maybe the private data of the people. What is the special challenge for combating the COVID-19 compared to other medical data or private data? Is there any specific challenge for, what do you think, Ms. Siti?
Actually, the specific challenge for data protection in combating 19 is we as a society don't have any enough information about the data protection itself as our right. For example, do you read the privacy policy when you install the apps, Paniko?
Yeah, I didn't read. I scroll down and agree. Yeah.
Yes, that's for example.
Yeah,
that's the challenge. Okay, thank you, Paniko. I think.
Okay. Yeah. So, is there another question? Okay. If no more question, then thank you very much for Miss Siti for very interesting speech.
Thank you, Paniko.
Thank you very much. So, I would like to invite the last presenter, the final presenter, from Mr. Rehaza Rahutomo, with the title Improvement of Jakarta Air Quality During the Large-Scale Social Restriction. So it's very interesting, yeah, because the COVID-19 also brings some good effect for the air quality. So yeah, we can see what kind of air improvement that happens. So please, Mr. Brilli, for the video.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Reza Rahutomo from Yunus University's Bioinformatics and Data Science Research Center. Today, I'm representing my author team, consisting of myself, Ms. Kartika Purwandari, Mr. Join Sibaninging, and Dr. Ben Spadonian, to present our newest research titled Improvement of Jakarta's Air Quality During Large-Scale Social Restriction. The President of Indonesia declared the outbreak reached Indonesia in the middle of March 2020. And large-scale social distancing, or PSBB, was chosen as COVID-19 prevention with consideration to minimize the damage or the impact in economy. It makes changes in people's life in Jakarta. A report from katadata.co.id revealed that the change of commercial habit in Jakarta can be seen in the workload increasement of Sicepat, a logistic company that operates in Jakarta. The workload was increased by 13% after PSBB was declared. On the other hand, BMKG, or Indonesia's Agency of Meteorology, Climate and Geophysics, state that Jakarta's air quality was improved as citizen mobility and operational of several factories were reduced. So this study aims to prove whether the Jakarta's air quality is improved or not by monitoring particulate matter 2.5 as one of the major pollutants. Previously, we have reviewed several studies that related to our case. Research from Purwanto found that school teachers in big cities have several advantages during social distancing. More flexible time, no time wasted on traffic jam, and more spare time for the family. But unfortunately, electrical bills were increased. The research from Praptana and Rianto revealed that government employees were affected by supervision, whether it's conditioned at home or office. We also reviewed related research for particulate matter in terms of pollution and air quality. Research from Kusumaning Tias revealed that during Hari Raya celebration, Jakarta's air quality is presumably clearer due to most of Jakarta residents are leaving the city for homecoming. The research discovered that on 2016, the minimum amount of particulate matter 2.5 is nearly 40 microgram per meter cube, while 2017 is less than 10 microgram per meter cube. Another research from Kusuma revealed that the period of March to April is the time when the amount of particulate matter 2.5 in Jakarta rises. To analyze the data in this research, we acquired the data from several weather stations in Jakarta. So we know that in Jakarta we have 3 weather stations. Number 1 is managed by BMKG. It is located in Kemayoran. And the other 2 is managed by the United States Consulate in Central Jakarta and South Jakarta. To categorize the air quality, we refer to the United States Environmental Protection Agency that provide air quality index with specific calculation of particulate matter 2.5. So in this research, we are focused on processing the data from the US Consulate in South Jakarta. The data is available on the website called aqicn.com. And as you can see, the data from the US Consulate in South Jakarta is the most complete data set from all, including BMKG. So before we discuss about Jakarta's air quality during large-scale social restriction, let's take a look at this figure titled Jakarta's average air quality in detail. So before we discuss about Jakarta's air quality in detail, please look at this figure titled Jakarta's monthly average on PM 2.5 during June 2019 to April 2020. According to this figure, Jakarta's air quality on 2019 is worse than 2020. The amount of particulate matter 2.5 remained constant between 140 to 150 micrograms per meter cube from June 2019 to October 2019. From October to January, the amount of particulate matter 2.5 significantly dropped to nearly 110 micrograms per meter cube. It followed with the rise of the concentration, but fortunately it never surpassed 130 micrograms per meter cube. So let's continue to review Jakarta's air quality during large-scale social restriction, or PSBB. So in this figure, we compiled the data into 2 periods of time, namely pre-PSBB, that consists of data from January to February 2020, and the other period we call it during PSBB, that consists of data from March to April 2020. On this figure, the curve of pre-PSBB is colored blue, and the other one called orange. Even though each period contains the same time frame, which is 9 weeks, different trends occurred on both figures. While the concentration of particulate matter 2.5 encountered downward trend on pre-PSBB, the curve goes upward during PSBB. This summarized that the establishment of PSBB from the local government of Jakarta on the 6th week was not deliver much impact. So to sum up this presentation, we can sum up to several points. So on early 2020, Jakartas are losing their intention to commute. This phenomena was indicated by the dawn of the economic recession. At the same time, COVID-19 news are getting popular through the internet. So the sudden spread of COVID-19 on the early March this year forced most of the people to stay at home and leads to less people mobility and less traffic jam. BMKG managed weather data acquisition system shows fragility in constant data recording. So that's why we are utilizing data from the US consulate. The large-scale social restriction, or PSBB, is proved to have a contribution to improve Jakarta's air quality, even though it is still categorized in unhealthy level. As we can see on 2019, the air quality of Jakarta is categorized in upper level of unhealthy level, but during PSBB, the weather quality was improved, but still categorized in unhealthy level, but in lower range. On the other side, large-scale social restriction, or PSBB, is ignored for some commuters as Ramadan season is coming. I think that will be all of my presentation. On behalf of Binus University's Bioinformatics and Data Science Center, I would like to say thank you for the committee of ECOMER 2020. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for Mr. Reza. Very interesting research about the effect of COVID-19 to the air condition or air quality. So is there any question from the audience? So I get the question from chat column from Dr. Hari. How the pollution rate will be after the new normal and pandemic? So what is your prediction, Mr. Reza?
Oh, hi, good afternoon all. For the question from Dr. Hari, we haven't do the prediction for this, but according to social media reports, that the condition that's stated as new normal is not new after all. Like people just going back to the usual activities, like using motorcycles, using cars. So it's not new after all. It's just normal, not new normal. So I think according to the social media reports, yeah, the post will be just the same. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hari, do you want to ask more? Or is it enough? So while waiting for Dr. Hari, I also invite for another question. So yeah, that's interesting, the research, Mr. Reza. So what is is it the part of like bigger research, like bigger, I mean, you analyze about the quality of the air during the COVID? Or maybe,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Is it your team like investigating many aspects of the COVID-19? Maybe you can tell about the research project.
Actually, yes. BDSRC is currently team up with Breathe Jakarta and also climatetracker.org to process air quality data. And in the near future, we would like to have a research to predict the Jakarta's air quality after the COVID-19 outbreak. And so, yeah, we are trying to prove that air quality have improved with COVID-19 outbreak. Yeah, but we just don't have tested the data yet.
Okay. Okay. So is there any question? So maybe quick question. So
Yes.
you say that after the large restriction social distancing, I mean, the air quality is still not healthy, right? So how long the unit the PSBB is needed to make it's normal? Do you have any?
Well, okay. First of all, the category of air quality in Jakarta is not moving from unhealthy level, but the concentration of particulate matter 2.5 is reduced. If you're asking me how long does it take ideally, I don't know. We cannot say the exact number, but if people in Jakarta is strict to the instruction from the local government to just stay at home, and then their wellness is provided by the government, I think for 6 months, PSBB is just enough to improve the air quality.
Okay, so
as long as no commute at all, no commuting.
6 months according to Mr. Reza. Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting point of view. So I think that's all the presentation from session 2, from session 5B. So thank you very much for all the presenter. Very excellent presentation from everyone. So before I end this session, maybe I will return to Brili. We have a photo session, right?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to, please allow your video to be turned on because we are going to have a photo session. I'm gonna ask each one of you to start video from inside the Zoom. We are going to have our group photo session for the 5th session of EcoBar, 2nd session of the 2nd day. Okay, everyone is looking good. The Dr. Suwajito, can you turn on your camera, please? And then also Dr. Norma Pawestri. First call, second call. Okay, it appears Dr. Suwajito and Dr. Norma is not present probably. We're gonna take the first picture right now. Everyone ready? Put on your best smile, find your best angle, fix your hair, but you're looking good already. I'm gonna count to 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, everyone is looking great. Do you want another picture? Another picture? Paniko, another picture?
Okay, it's okay. Yes, let's take another picture. 1 and 2 now.
Politik pa, nggak boleh pa. Okay, let's take the second picture. Please change your poses if you want. 1, 2, sorry, just a minute, someone. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much. This is the end of the 5th section in the 2nd day of EcoBar. For everyone that does not know, Pak Nico is not only the session chair for this session, but it's also the chairperson for the EcoBar 2020. So thanks a lot for Pak Nico for this conference.